Thanks you for jumping on today's Cyber Showcase. As always, we're covering a really good topic. This is an exciting one. We do this once a year. It's our 2026 TRAC State of the State. So we've got a bunch of great guests with us to talk about what TRAC looked like in 2025, what we did there, as well as what it looks like in the future. So for anybody on the call that is a current TRAC customer, we certainly really appreciate you being a partner of ours, and anybody who's interested in learning more about TRAC and maybe coming on board after today, we'd be happy to have that conversation as well. So with that said, just by way of introductions, we've got so many guests, I've got a slide to myself here, being selfish a bit, but I am Bret Rock. I'm your host and a sales manager here at SBS. We do have a number of great people on here with me. I'm going to start with right at the top there, John Waldman, president and co-founder of the company. John, you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We are glad that you are here.
Tony Meyer is our director of product.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining.
Zach Bierman, who I actually still spelled his name wrong there, so I apologize, Zach. I'll fix that going forward. But Zach, you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone, and glad to get a chance to do this again.
And then Lindsay is an ongoing participant in our Cyber Showcase in the last few months. Lindsay, you want to say hello?
Yeah, thanks, Bret. Hey, everyone. Happy to be back.
Great. So with that said, let's just talk quickly about the agenda. It's a very packed one today. We got a lot of exciting stuff to talk about. We're going to start with our normal marketing corner. Lindsay's going to handle that for us. We're going to take kind of a trip down TRAC memory lane. John Waldman is going to help me with that, having been here from the get-go. He'll be a perfect person to talk about where TRAC started. Zach is going to cover what we did in 2025, and I'll give you a little spoiler alert. It's a lot. Tony is going to cover what the TRAC roadmap looks like, and then time permitting, we will wrap up with some questions and answers. So a lot of great stuff to get to. Before we do that, though, I do have one exciting announcement to make. We also have another person on the call with us today. Dawn Sprayman is a relatively newcomer to the team. She joined, I think, in November, if I'm not mistaken. She is going to be taking over all TRAC software sales for the company into the future here. So for all of you who are tired of hearing me do demos and talking about TRAC, you're not off the hook entirely just yet, but Dawn will be taking over most of that going forward. So Dawn, do you want to say hello?
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here. Happy to be a part of this, and really happy to be working with TRAC, and those of you who already have it and those of you who will have it. Just really excited about it.
Excellent. So you're going to be hearing a lot more from Dawn in the future, and really appreciate you coming on here today. So with that said, Lindsay, we'll start with you with the marketing corner. I know you've got some good stuff coming up.
Yeah, since today's session focuses on the latest updates in TRAC, I wanted to share a few resources that go deeper into the platform. So we have Moving Beyond the FFIEC CAT, a guide to the CRI profile module in TRAC, and it covers all the common questions about CRI and how to determine whether it's the right framework for your institution. And then we also have how TRAC supports your move to NIST CSF, and that walks through the key considerations when evaluating NIST and how TRAC can support a really seamless transition. And then we also have Ditch the Spreadsheet and Upgrade Your IT Risk Assessment with TRAC. This one talks about how if you're still managing risk in spreadsheets, really those limitations that you're going to be seeing and how TRAC can simplify the process and provide you some real-time visibility. So all three of those blogs are actually written by Bret himself. So they're packed with practical guidance from one of our experts. And then we also have Tony Meyer explaining how TRAC supports GRC on the Grow Your Credit Union podcast. So you'll hear more from Tony today, of course, and this interview is a great follow-up if you want additional insight into how TRAC supports GRC. And then finally, we have Celebrating Creativity and Community with our AI Coloring Book Contest. This was part of our community outreach program. We created AI-generated coloring pages around the cybersecurity heroes theme, and you can view all of the winning designs, download them to color for your team, or even run a similar contest at your organization. So we had a lot of fun with it and got to donate some money to charity at the same time. So we hope those resources will provide some helpful context and follow up after today's session.
Those blog posts all sounded really familiar, so I'm glad I wasn't going crazy. But I know we've got some upcoming webinars, including some Institute stuff, so I'll let you cover those real quick.
Yeah, on the education side, coming up on January 21st, Justin Hicks will be sharing tips for building a cybersecurity culture at your institution. He'll talk about moving from reactive training to a more proactive approach, and how that can help with security awareness training across the org. And then up on January 27th, we have Nick Podorodsky, our Hacker Hour host, joined by an expert from Brady Martz. They'll cover exam readiness, what examiners are looking for, and some key regulatory topics to keep in mind for 2026. And then finally, on January 29th, Dylan Kreitzfeld will walk through how to strengthen your M365 security from configuration to practical controls. And it'll all be without slowing down collaboration across your team and really maximizing the benefits of it. So be sure to check those out and register so you don't miss what's coming up. And I'll pass it back to you, Bret.
Thanks, Lindsay. And I think, John, you can chime in here. This last one was a member request. I think we even have a nice logo for that, right? I know the M365 ones for the Institute last year were some of our best ones that we had done, or maybe our most popular ones is the better way to put it.
Yes, and shout out to Kim Chuklovic, who is actually on the webinar. That was one of her ideas as we were talking in Ohio last year, but we've been getting a lot of requests around, how do we enable certain elements of Microsoft 365 securely so that we can do different types of stuff, maybe that we haven't done before, or carve out something, like sharing files externally outside your tenant. Is one of the major things that we're talking about there. So yeah, a lot of good stuff there.
Perfect. All right. Well, you are going to stick around here because we are transitioning into your segment of the story here. So we thought last year we kind of skipped this part. We had done, I think this is the third year in a row we've done this State of the State for TRAC. The first one, we had Nick Podorodsky on here to talk about the kind of the beginnings and what it was like to sell TRAC in the early days. But I thought this year would be a really good opportunity to hear from somebody who was really at the ground level. So John, I kind of wanted to start, and I've added some of our screenshots from our previous version. So anybody who's been a TRAC user for a long time may be getting some nostalgia or night terrors. I'm not sure what way you want to think about it, but
Dak is visibly distraught at the moment.
There you go. So let's just start at the beginning. Take us back, kind of the moment when you and the team kind of realized, and I think TRAC you mentioned has been around probably for 19 years or so now. Take us back to the moment when you kind of realized that financial institutions in particular were just managing risk. The way they were doing it just wasn't working. What do you remember about that time when you were first getting started?
So as I was noodling on how to tell the story, I thought I would at least set the stage.
Yeah.
For those of you on the call that are old enough to remember 2005, and I have to say that now because I'm no spring chicken any longer. Zach might have been in elementary school, but back in 2005, the top songs of 2005, because this is where I go when I start thinking of setting the stage. There was Holler Back Girl by Gwen Stefani, Gold Digger by Kanye, The Boulevard of Broken Dreams by Green Day, and one of the classics, one of my all-time favorite songs, Mr. Brightside by The Killers, which was a staple back in the day when I used to sing karaoke. The iPod Shuffle and the Xbox 360 were launched in 2005. So this is still pre-iPhone, iPod Shuffle. Flat panel TVs became a thing. Google Maps was first launched, as well as MySpace became a thing. And that's also when Chad Knutson, my business partner of the last 20 some years, and myself graduated with our master's degree in information assurance from Dakota State University. And during our time in our master's program, there were financial institutions in the area that were reaching out because if you guys, those of you, and I see lots of familiar faces that we've known for the last 20 or so years on the call. And thank you guys all that have been in our ecosystem and friends of SBS for the last 20 years, that not all just clients, but we've definitely become friends. You guys remember what that time was like and in the technology space. So one of the other things that we talk about a lot, especially, related to the changes in technology today, is if you guys remember back in the early 2000s was when financial institutions first started getting examined on IT stuff. And I'll still never forget the first sit down, knockout, drag out IT exam that we had with the FDIC and a client here in South Dakota, a small community bank, where the examiners told us that we were doing IT risk assessment and IT audit backwards. And so we spent almost a whole day kind of walking through all of our processes of how we did this stuff. And they finally said, all right, that makes sense. And the examiner in charge of that examination went around and said, hey, I can't tell you, get to the next 9 banks that he went to, said, I can't tell you to, go work with these guys, but you should give them a call. So, but it was really interesting because as soon as we graduated from our master's program in May of 2025, we kind of set out into SBS full time to make sure to see if we could make this a thing. And the first thing that we did, the thing that we did really for the next 6 months, is we did IT risk assessments for financial institutions kind of in the tri-state area, if you will. So Chad would go out to a bank, I would go out to a bank. The other 2 guys that were with us at the time, Eric and Cody, would go out to banks, and we would just sit down and we would do an IT risk assessment. And we used an Access database at the time that we had built out that, really was essentially how we do IT risk assessment still today. But we would go out and we would inventory assets, and we would, rate out a protection profile like you see on the screen, right? With confidentiality, integrity, availability, and volume. And we would create that protection profile, and then we would map these threats. And back then we would map a threat, and then we would have to go and check off all of the controls that would mitigate risk to that threat. And then we go on to the next threat, and we have to do the same thing. Didn't matter if the controls were the same, we'd have to do it again. So we spent, half of a week or so just sitting down interviewing the most knowledgeable people at the bank, because there weren't necessarily information security officers back in 2005. In some cases there were, but it was, whoever's kid was going to college for, technology stuff, or whoever had the first email address, or, this guy seems, or this gal seems to know the most about technology, so they're in charge. But that's what we did. And we did that for like 6 months, right? So we would go out, we would do an IT risk assessment. At the end of the week, we would come back and we'd sit down around the board table in our very first ever office. And we would just kind of go through what our findings were from this past week. Like, I was in De Smet, South Dakota, and Chad was in, Des Moines, Iowa, or whatever the case was. And we would talk about all of the different IT assets that we did, and how we rated out protection profiles, and how we rated out threats and impacts and probabilities, and what controls made sense from a technology perspective, and how we rated those things out. And after we were doing this for 6, 7, 8 weeks, it just kind of dawned on us that we were just doing the same thing over and over and over again. And it also dawned on us that, hey, most financial institutions have the same technologies. And hey, the financial institutions are going to rate out the protection profiles and the impacts and probabilities of the threats, and mostly, kind of the weights of the controls. That's pretty much the same. There were some differences, but we started saying, well, we can automate some of this stuff, right? Like, it's not rocket surgery. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do if you're starting from scratch. But if you've got, the secret sauce here, like, how can we predefine this stuff for our clients so that, and it started as just a way to create efficiencies for ourselves, right? So then we didn't have to spend 3 days interviewing, 10 different people at a client location. Like, how can we make that 1 day or a day and a half? How can we, save 50% efficiency on this? So that's when we started in the back end of, in about 2026, we pulled in a couple individuals that we knew from Dakota State University, from our relationships there, that were new technology and new development. And we started kind of sketching out those guys were sketching out on a contract basis for us, a tool. And so we called it originally the Technology Risk Assessment Calculator. So if you guys are, keeping track at home, that's what TRAC originally stood for. I mean, it still kind of does. We just don't necessarily say that anymore. Sort of like SBS used to stand for something. Now it's just SBS. But so we started sketching that out, and then then that poses a number of different questions. So also, for those of you guys that have been in banking that long, you probably remember, at least I'm hoping this isn't necessarily how it still works today, but back in those days when you needed to update your core banking platform, which was hosted locally, Fiserv or FIS or Jack Henry or whomever would send you out a whole package of CDs once a quarter, and you'd have to spend the weekend updating your core banking platform, manually, and making sure that all of that stuff worked out. And we're like, you know what? And we're also doing social engineering at the time. So part of that, when back in the day, was, sometimes we would send out a CD as a social engineering test for some of our clients that said, core banking updates, and see if somebody would put it in a CD-ROM and, click on the exe file, and it would let us know. So we said, that seems like a really bad idea. Like when we started, the first iteration of TRAC was the IT risk assessment, and then I don't remember for certain if the information security program was an immediate thing or if we just started with IT risk assessment and information security came next. But the idea was you go through everything starts with your risk assessment, and the folks that have known me for a long time are sick of me saying that over the last 20 years, but that's, how we built TRAC, and then your information security program comes next. And we built it and designed it so that, you could select whether or not you checked off certain controls and you wanted those in your information security program. So it was kind of designed to be, again, 20 years ago, almost a one-click information security program document. It's expanded a lot over the years, but so it started with IT risk assessment for sure. I don't remember if the information security program came immediately after or at the same time, but it was within the next 6 to 8 months for sure. But then we were like, okay, well, what happens if we need to add assets? Because we had 25 assets probably when we launched TRAC in the beginning of 2007. And what if we want to add some assets? What if we want to add threats or add controls? What if we want to add modules? Are we going to send CDs out? Are we going to burn, like 200 copies of a CD and mail them out? That sounds terrible. So then we said, well, let's just put it on the internet, right? And remember, this is around the time like Facebook was launching. So, the YouTube was in 2005, 2006. So, Web 2.0 was just kind of finally here. We were transitioning away from GeoCities pages to, like something like the modern internet looks, at least a little bit. And so we said, well, that seems like a smarter idea, because then we can just update it once and then not have to, mail out CDs. And then inevitably, 50% of the folks that we reached out to immediately about using TRAC said, well, can we install it locally? We're like, no, that's not how this is going to work. And they're like, I don't know. We don't know about that. So,
well, you've already hit a number of the prompts I had on the why part. So that I really am always fascinated by the how. And I think the idea that you're talking about, kind of just some of the logistical stuff, right? It's we have this great idea, now what kind of thing. So I think the CD piece is a really cool example of how you adapted and kind of moved it to more of the online direction. And obviously we're a pretty early adopter there. But do you remember kind of any point in time that you just said, going from we can help you do this to, oh my God, we just need to build something? And it probably sounds like it was when you were, finishing those early manual risk assessments, right?
Yeah, because that's what all of our clients needed, back in the 2005, 6, 7 timeframe, was they needed an IT risk assessment and an audit. So that's where we really kind of got to work in 2006, building out TRAC, what that looked like, testing it out with some clients, and then launching it, I believe, if I remember correctly, in early 2007.
Was there anything about the process of kind of coming up with the data, or coming up with the concept of how it was going to operate, that was harder than you expected it to be at the time?
Well, we're a bunch of nerds and engineers here at SBS, and Zach knows this to be true because he sees the formulas and that go into the back end of this. And so part of it was, how do you really take the controls and let clients only have to check a control one time instead of 27 times, or with some of our controls that mitigate a lot of risk to a lot of different assets. And that methodology then kind of carried through after we built IT risk assessment, over into vendor, over into the way complicated, crazy formula that you can still blame Chad Knutson for, Zach, on the dependencies and stuff in the BIA. So those were kind of the interesting challenges that we faced right away. Like, how do we make sure that it's right and accurate and consistent across the board? But we still meet on a monthly basis and talk about content. And I'm still on that content committee. So we talk about, all right, what IT assets need to be added, what threats, and what are the impacts and probabilities of those threats that we need to review, and how do we make sure these things are consistent? So that's we're pretty proud of kind of the secret sauce of TRAC. And it does say 2007 at the bottom in that little copyright thing. So I think we've been doing it that long anyways.
So I've got to tell you, I've been doing demos of TRAC for probably the last 8 years. And in 2025, I did, I think, 310 of them. I think I told the same story about the BCM, how we get the BIA every time, that they won't even tell me what the formula is. So I guess I got to go to Chad to get it. So glad we have at least somebody there. So let's talk more about the philosophy as we're starting to wrap up this section of it. Obviously we talk a lot as a company about being compliance important. We want to make sure you're doing the things that you need to be doing, but using information to drive the decision-making process is probably more critical. So as you were thinking about TRAC and kind of as it's evolved, how has that approach, that perspective kind of driven what we've done with the tool in your mind?
Yeah, and I think that the philosophy here is a little bit about what makes us different, because we were never about, it's funny that you are on the controls screen here, because this is, I think, what is the big differentiator and always has been for us is we're not about just the things that that you're doing, right? So it's more about, how do I use this information, as you were alluding to, Brett, to make decisions around what to do next to mitigate my risk. So to my knowledge, we were one of the first to highlight, not just here, list out the controls that you're doing to mitigate risk, but in fact, here's a universe of controls that you need to say you're either doing or not doing or planning on doing in the future, so that you have a good idea, not just about what you're doing, but what you could be doing to manage that risk. Because that's where it gets to like the initial philosophy around risk mitigation here is what I like to equate to batting average in baseball, right? You have to be able to measure it. And it's really hard to say, here's my inherent risk. Here are the 10 controls that I've got in place to mitigate this risk. What's your inherent risk? How are you managing and mitigating that risk if all you're doing is looking at those 10 controls? It'd be like, Brett, if I said, hey, I played baseball and I made it to the majors and I had 10 hits, what's your first question?
How many at bats?
Exactly right. So like, of course, you've got 10 controls out of how many? If it's 10 controls out of 30 controls, you're batting, 333. That's more than just a cup of coffee. But if it was out of 300 controls, you're like, well, no wonder you're not in the majors anymore. So that's really the ultimate philosophy, is how do you leverage what you're doing to make decisions? And we always would say, if you're going to spend one information security dollar yet this year, where are you going to spend it? So that was always our philosophy. Like, what are the next steps? How can we build a tool to help our clients really understand the next steps that they should be taking from an information security perspective, whether it's
and I think it's
IT
really
or vendor or whatever.
And I think it's really cool that that's something that's just carried throughout. Our messaging has changed here and there, but the core philosophy behind TRAC has always been, how can we give you what you need to make the best decisions possible? So I'm going to wrap up with 2 questions before we get to Zach and kind of some of the highlights in 2025. But obviously looking back 19 years now, is there anything in particular about where TRAC is as a product now, maybe that surprises you or that you're particularly proud of?
Lasting power, I think, it's kind of fun to look back and to have both seen other tools out there emulate what we do, to watch regulation kind of catch up to the philosophies that we had at the beginning. And obviously, with the state of technology today, there's a lot of really cool, exciting things that, and I'd take anything away from Tony to share with you about. But as TRAC continues to grow and evolve, that's what I'm super proud of. I'm super proud that it's a tool that our teams have built. I couldn't be more proud of our software development team having been part of this company for almost 20 years now, and in-house software development team. Zach's been here for a lot of that, and he's seen lots of stuff. So shout out to those guys. But and for folks, I know that there's some folks on the call here that I've seen that have been using it for 15, 17, maybe close to 20 years. So thank you guys for believing in us and trusting us, and hopefully we've provided you some good value over the years.
All right, last question, and then I'll let you go, I promise. And again, you may steal some of Tony's thunder. We'll allow it here. You're the president after all. So, what excites you most about where TRAC is heading?
Oh, there's so many cool things that the product team is working on, from AI integrations to API stuff to all the awesome things that they've been doing. How we've turned CRI and NIST 2.0 out the door so quick in the last year. It's a big testament to those guys, how quickly and nimbly we've been able to adapt to the market. So thanks again to those guys, but the best is yet to come for TRAC. So stay tuned.
That's very, very true. So thank you so much, John. Really appreciate you being on here. If you have to go, we completely understand. But again, thanks for jumping on. This is a good opportunity. I missed this at the top, so I apologize. If anybody does have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box. We'll either answer them at the end if we have time, or I'll certainly follow up. And then we do have a very short survey that we hope you will take at the end as well. You think after doing this for 3 years, I'd remember to mention that at the top, but such is life, I suppose. So let's talk about TRAC in 2025. And Zach, I'm going to pull you in to talk, obviously, about the kind of quarter by quarter highlights, but I do want to start just kind of by talking at a high level here. I think 2025 was the most impressive year from a TRAC perspective in my time that I've been here. 4 new modules that were released. Again, not to steal too much thunder, we rolled out a NIST CSF module to help with the replacement of the CAT. CRI profile was one that we added along the way. We only recently, probably in the third quarter, added an ASET module. So for our friends in the credit union space, we've got a tool for that. And then I want to pull Tony in on this one because we only recently, probably in the last 2 or 3 weeks, really fully launched our employee access module. Tony, I don't know if you have any thoughts on kind of why that one was so important for us. I think that one came directly from some customer feedback, and maybe what we're trying to do with that one real quick.
Yeah, I think it originated from customer feedback. There was, I think it's a very logical module for TRAC. We've got our IT assets in TRAC,
Sorry, Tony, you're kind of going in and out there. Well, while she's breaking up, maybe I'll brag a little bit about the employee access module.
We're able to leverage a couple different.
Sorry, Tony, you were breaking up a little bit.
My back.
Yes, you are now.
Sorry about that.
Nope, you're good. So yeah, we're very excited about employee access. Obviously, it's a relatively new module. I know Zach and his team worked very hard over the period of a couple of years on that one because we had some breakup along the way here in terms of working on some other modules we wanted to make sure we got out. But if you are looking to transition from a spreadsheet-based approach to helping with employee access and who has access to what, and if they leave, how do we make sure we take the access away and things like that, that's a great module. Again, works really well with IT risks. So feel free to reach out if you're ever interested in taking a look at that. We also launched SSO finally, and then you're going to hear more about AI and TRAC in the near future here as well. So Well, we'll hope that Tony gets her side of things figured out real quick. But Zach, let's transition over to you. We want to talk about some of the highlights throughout the course of the year. So I know you got kind of a quarter by quarter breakdown. I'll let you go through this and I'll try to keep up with you here.
Yeah, absolutely. So 2025 was an absolutely stellar year in terms of pushing out new products, new tools, and things that customers can use and really affect their kind of security posture. And so kicking it off with Q1, we released NIST as a complete module. And this was the first module we've released in multiple years, and I think even since FFIEC CAT release. So it had been quite some time since we had gotten something. And like you had mentioned on the slide before, we knocked out 4 this year, which is incredible. So I'm so absolutely proud of the team and the work that they've been doing. Beyond the NIST module, we got employees added to the BCM call trees, which was a much needed functionality to make sure those were kind of fully useful and usable for customers. We created a number of new reports. So this included a new action tracking report, the incomplete items report, which action tracking hadn't seen a new report in quite some time. A control impact report brought to all of the risk assessment modules. The vendor question set maintenance report brought to vendor. And then we also went through, updated our terms and conditions, which was primarily focused at some of the AI features that we're bringing. And I'm sure Tony will speak more about some of the specifics about AI later. We also added our SBS due diligence documents to our TRAC resources page. It was a pretty common request to have those available. And so we just thought it would be an easier way to access those resource documents if you could get them directly in our tool. And then finally, single sign-on went into the pre-alpha stage. This was kind of the initial first customers, making sure that we had single sign-on working to a level where we could do a full rollout.
So I want to go back to the NIST module, and I think, again, you'll talk about the other modules released. And the fact that I think I went 8 years in TRAC without having a new module, and then we got 4 in one, certainly complicated my life to some degree, but was a real benefit to TRAC and all our users. But talking about the NIST one, I think that was, if I'm not mistaken, the first module we've ever really created that had both a free and a licensable version. Am I right about that? And then were there any challenges in that process or anything it taught you about that you and your team could take forward with maybe some modules in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. And there were definitely some distinct challenges with that. First off, we wanted to make sure that the free version of the NIST module was fully effective for what any of our customers wanted to do with NIST. And so when we're looking at bringing a premium tier in place, we also need to be looking, okay, what are the extra features? What are the things that we could bring absolute value to our customers on? And so where I think there was a lot of additional challenge, and it being the first time we've implemented something in this kind of 2-stage process, is identifying, okay, what features do we definitely need to have available? What features make sense at a premium level? And how do we kind of plan and prioritize that to make sure we have those ready and raring to go for customers once they're ready to hop in?
Probably the first of many challenges you and your team had to confront this year, but I'm sure we'll talk about some of the others as we move along. So Q2, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, so Q2, we moved on to our next module. So working through the CRI module. This one, we were partnered with CRI on it to kind of bring their resources into our tool. So that added a few additional challenges with making sure we could match what they needed from us. But that was an excellent work through, and we got a great product at the end of it. We also did the FFIEC to NIST migration tool. We got that completed and released as a tool to help that process of translating from if you were using FFIEC CAT before to NIST. We continued work on the employee access module and AI. So these were both kind of all-year projects. And as we shifted priorities, FFIEC CAT and that sunsetting definitely shifted some of our roadmap goals around over this last year. And so employee access kind of took a backseat, but worked alongside as we were working through these other things. We began discovery on our ASET module and started working through the initial ticket creation for that. We began the rollout and full pre-alpha for single sign-on, which led to really awesome adaption. It worked very seamlessly. There have been pretty minimal issues with getting people onboarded onto single sign-on. Vendor management documentation page was redesigned. I know there was some struggles with this and some that we're continuing to make some additional adjustments to. And it's one of those things where if there's any UI feedback you guys have, we always love to hear that so we can take that and continue to make further adjustments. But this was a redesign that was needed as we were looking to do the AI implementation for vendor. We needed to make some redesigns for the page to implement that in. And so we're continuing to iterate off of that. And then the RSAT vendor management question set got updated. And then the cybersecurity assessment policy was added to the ISP documentation module.
So not only did I spell your name wrong, I left a bullet on this page that didn't need to be there. So I promise you I'm not doing this on purpose. But let me back up a little bit here. I think one thing that really struck me as I was putting the deck together based off of the highlights you'd sent me is that some of these things weren't just creating new modules, they were kind of creating tools within tools, like the FFIEC to NIST migration tool. Obviously, we also subsequently released an FFIEC CAT to CRI tool. So we were able to take anybody who has our current CAT module of TRAC, you can take that data and migrate it over as much as possible into either of the new frameworks. Is that something that you view as an opportunity to do more of in the future in terms of those tools inside of tools sort of things?
Absolutely. We primarily look for ways that we can have intermodule interaction because I mean, not only does it help increase the usability for customers, the want to access these different modules, but it really helps ease the process, especially with these migration tools to go from one to another. I mean, everyone needed to look at a different tool after FFIEC CAT, and there's a lot of questions to answer, whether you're going to NIST or going to CRI. There's a ton to get through, and you've got this whole survey already filled out with FFIEC CAT information. So that was a real priority for us to determine, okay, how do we make that easier for customers? How do we improve that process and workflow to make that transition as easy as possible?
I guess the last thing I'll talk about on this page, because again, it should just say that single sign-on rollout began, not that we went pre-alpha 2 quarters in a row, but we began rolling it out. And I know that was a feature that's been heavily requested for a long time. So, what made that to you so important to get added to TRAC? And then do you see it having any additional application as we move forward?
Yeah. For one, it has been one of our longest lasting features for request in our backlog. I think even when we were on the legacy system, I think we still had some requests out there, even if that request was just from our IT department really wanting it. But not only is it a better security mechanism to control access, and being a security company, that's really important to us. It also just allows an easier workflow for login. It's a single button click rather than needing to remember your org ID. So it makes the user experience better. And as we look forward, one of our future plans is to implement SCIM provisioning, so you have even more control over access and role-based permissions from an organizational level.
Awesome. All right, let's take a look at Q3 then.
Yeah, so Q3, we completed and released the ASET module. So three quarters, 3 modules. That was an awesome rate for modules in the year. We added some new audit module templates, which included the Office 365 audit and the RSET audit. We had some new reports for risk assessment control impact report and another action tracking rejected items report. So 2 action tracking reports in a year, which I think doubled the number of action tracking reports that existed.
Right.
We had more than 25 updates to the ISP documentation module that included a few brand new documents, as well as a huge number of updates to existing documents. We began the internal testing for AI in the vendor module. So we got to the point where it was ready to be tested. We were working with a number of our internal people to work through that, and that is still an ongoing process. Again, I'll kind of redirect that to Tony in her section to talk more on. User guides were added for our newer modules. As we have knocked out new modules, we want to make sure that users have kind of the workflow and information to help them along the way with them. We continued on employee access. This was really a module that stretched out, and it was a lot of effort to get all of the intricacies working with it. So That continued through Q3. And then vendor management architecture updated to improve load times. So this was another kind of background task. So less seen directly by the users, but it hopefully is felt as we improve some of the front end architecture to improve load times as you're moving through the page, and it just is easier for us to continue to update and make changes as we go forward.
And I guess I probably should explain. I don't know that everybody in the audience is aware, but we do have an audit module in TRAC that's been around for a while, but we refreshed it, as Zach mentioned, with those 2 new modules. So if you're an internal audit person, or you've got somebody at your institution that's doing that all manually or on spreadsheets, we certainly have some capabilities to make that easier. And then our ISP documentation module is one that I really can't recommend enough. As I mentioned earlier, I had been doing this for a long time, demo-wise. In that entire time, I've never met anybody that likes writing policies and procedures. I'm sure there are people out there that exist, but if you don't like writing them, you don't want to start from scratch, we've got a module that we keep updated, as you can probably tell, with a suite full of templates that you're welcome to use as well. So feel free to reach out about those. But Zach, I want to get to Q4 because I know we had some really exciting things there, and then we'll kind of wrap up with a few questions I've got for you.
Absolutely. Well, we've been talking about employee access throughout these quarters, and we finally got to a completed point with the employee access module in Q4. We also were doing some additional internal testing on our TRAC AI and some refinement, as well as looking at some additional areas to start implementation with AI on. So we're starting to expand on that process and make sure that when we get that fully launched, we've got some really awesome tools to bring to you guys. We began development on a new incident response module, so that's going to be our next release, I believe. Development began on some new e-commerce capabilities. This is going to be focused on trials and being able to have both external and current customers request trials themselves and make that workflow a little bit easier, and hopefully improve the process for you guys to try out new things and be able to trigger that by yourself. We added a new vendor status overview report to the vendor module. We added asynchronous reporting and kind of completed the core component for that, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second here. We completed a telephony services replacement. So this is going to be related to doing the MFA login, the thing that sends out the code when you do MFA, whether that's the phone call or the text message. We needed to replace that with a new service. So we did that towards the end of this year. And then we did a conversion of our login page, updated to use a newer front-end framework. That both handles some security updates as well as just generally making it easier to work with in the future.
Again, a pretty amazing year from a TRAC perspective, all the work you guys did, and not just the work on your team. I think obviously you guys are fantastic, but we do, as John mentioned earlier on, have an entire content development team. I can't give them enough credit as well. So lots of great teamwork, lots of great effort went into this whole thing. I know you were very excited to talk about asynchronous reporting core component, and I only recently realized what that was, but why don't you tell the audience, and certainly not me, who definitely knows what it is, why that's important?
Yeah, so there's kind of 2 aspects to this, and one aspect is fully implemented, and the other aspect we're working on finishing touches for and kind of getting a finished proof of concept in place. So the first aspect of this, many of you that have been customers for a long time will be a big fan of the fact that we had a 25 megabyte limitation on uploading files in the system. And by big fan, I mean we had many requests asking that to be removed or increased over the years. In this last year, we have removed that. So there is still an upper bound, but that upper bound is large enough that it shouldn't realistically be hit by most documents. So that was the first half of it that has been implemented. You should be able to upload significantly larger files into our tool without issue. The second half of this, and this is the part that we're working on going into this year, is the ability to download larger size reports without running into the timeout issue, which is another request that we've run into consistently over the year, especially with some of those really, really big reports that take a lot of processing power to chunk together. If they run to a significant extent, sometimes they time out, you have to start it again, maybe it just isn't generating for you. Our plan is to offload that so it will fully generate the report in the back end, and you can go do whatever you want in the tool. You can go and start working on something else, and it'll pop up a notification in the tool telling you your report is ready, and you'll be able to download it directly without having to wait for that generation. So that is our next step with the asynchronous reporting.
Yeah, there's so many things that you guys are doing that I think, it's just, we don't really realize how impactful they're going to be until they're actually there. So I think that's a great example of that. All right, before I do get to hopefully Tony, I'll get to, we'll check on her in a second here. Obviously, there were years where we didn't release a single new module of TRAC. This year we released 4. You've done all these other things, you and your team. So outside of just kind of being exhausted, how would you have described working on TRAC in 2025?
It's cliche, but honestly, just exciting. I think it's super fun to be working on these new things. We've got a ton of really awesome stuff planned for this next year that Tony will talk through. And I know that being able to focus on these things from kind of from a high level in our company has been really awesome. And we've got a good amount of freedom to make some choices and make some really cool and really useful changes for the customers. So I think just if I were to describe it in one word, it would be just exciting.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I also want to just reiterate something you mentioned earlier on. We obviously greatly appreciate any feedback our users have. So if there are things that you think we need to be fixing, or you're sitting at your desk someday and you say, "Man, I wish TRAC could do this." We obviously have put a lot of thought and energy into what we are going to do, what we're doing, how we can make this better. But the more feedback we can get from everybody out there, we certainly would appreciate. And then, Tony, are you there? I wanted to bring up the user group, and thought you might want to talk about that for a second.
Yeah, I am. Hopefully,
Excellent.
I won't have any connectivity issues. I haven't had any for I don't know how many months, and then of course you get on the cyber showcase, and that's when my internet decides to be flaky. But hopefully, I won't have any issues.
Great. Well, I think the last time we did this, I made you do it from an airport,
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken. So maybe I should take the blame on some of it. But before we get into the roadmap, I know we've had a lot of great success with our user groups, and I apologize I didn't put it on a slide anywhere. But thinking about customer feedback and kind of engagement with our customers, do you want to talk a little bit about what those are like, and maybe when our next one's coming up?
Yeah, for sure. So we always have 2 TRAC user groups every year. So we have one coming up in March. It's usually the Wednesday right in the middle of March. I don't have the date in front of me. I think it's March 17th, if I remember right, but right around that time. We always identify 1 or 2 modules that we really focus on, but it is very broad information about TRAC. We bring Mariah in, who's our trainer. She gives great tips and tricks on TRAC, so you can learn something new, even if you've been a longtime user. We always highlight new features and functionality. And then Zach and I also do kind of a more brief review of like what we did the quarter before and then what's coming up as well. So you kind of keep that peak of the roadmap included as well. But it's a great opportunity to learn new things about TRAC. And again, that's twice a year, March and September.
Excellent. All right. So I think this is probably the part, not that they didn't want to hear Zach and John. I absolutely guarantee everybody did, but I think most people are always excited about what's coming. So you've got the most exciting piece of things here. And I'm just going to let you cover this. I'll try to be as quiet as I can ever be, at least initially. Do you want to walk us through what the roadmap for TRAC looks like in 2026?
I would love to. And I think this is the most exciting thing as well. Everything Zach covered from last year, we're so proud of and so exciting. But as someone
when we were doing so well. Tony, are you there? Well,
oh, no.
Sorry, Tony. We'll wait till you come back in here. You feel free to interrupt me whenever you want to. I think maybe Zach, if you don't mind, maybe you and I can work on this one a little bit and kind of cover some of it before while Tony's trying to get that sorted out. But obviously, we've got a big roadmap for 2026. We had a big year in 25. I think we're going to continue that going forward. A lot of great, you can kind of see on the screen here, breakouts from the top to the bottom.
Brett, I think I'm back if you want.
There you are.
I'm going to keep my video off.
Oh, there we go.
Very bad.
I'm going to turn it back over to you. I was just trying to set the table. You know,
I'll try not to put you in that position where you have to wing it.
That's all good.
We talked a lot about 2025. A lot of the focus was on, rolling out the new modules with NIST and CRI. Those were a huge focus for us, obviously, with some of the regulatory changes that we saw over the last 12 to 18 months. So we had a big focus on that in 2025. 2026, we certainly won't take our foot off the gas in terms of new functionality, but we're also going to spend a large amount of time and a large amount of our roadmap focusing on making some of the modules that we have in TRAC more valuable for our customers that use those on a regular basis. So you'll see at the top, audit and vendor are two that we're going to spend some time on early in the year.
Tony, you there?
One of the other key things, am I cut?
A little bit. You are back now.
I don't know what's causing that. I apologize.
You're good.
One of the key things I want to make sure I get out in case I cut out again. So with our software products, I've been in software product management for a very long time. That user interface refresh that you see on there is such a key component of keeping our product up to date. As technology changes, people get so used to their consumer devices and their consumer applications, like making sure that we keep that user interface fresh, making sure that the usability is there. If you haven't noticed, we did hire a user interface, a designer, someone who has a lot of experience in just understanding, user experience. So some of our new modules, you can see there's a little bit different look and feel. And so we're going to utilize her skill set, utilize her talents, and do a full refresh of TRAC in 2026. That's no small effort, but definitely something that'll be a huge value for TRAC. When you kind of manage a product roadmap, there's certain things that you always allocate time to. You'll see on here content and reporting. John and Zach both talked about that. That's such a big part of TRAC and such a key component. We're always going to allocate time in our roadmap for content reporting updates as well as support and maintenance. We have a larger focus on support and maintenance. We've gone through some big lifts. I know looking back, even 2024, we had some technology improvements that we needed to make. So we always want to make sure we're looking at those support maintenance tickets, looking at the technical architecture, and investing time and money into making sure that we keep our technology up to date. So that's always important. Base functionality, we're going to utilize, AI capabilities potentially to make our data more accessible within TRAC with dashboard and reporting enhancements. Zach touched on, we're laying the groundwork to be able to do some additional components with data and reporting. I know data is so important, with AI and with the information that we have in TRAC. There's so much data in there. That's such a key component. Some of the key things on the innovation side that we're focusing on, Zach mentioned a little bit on the incident response module. That again is a key component. It's so important to our customers today. Having that incident response plan, having a place to track, log, plan, test potential incidents, and then report on those unfortunately, if an incident does occur. So that'll be a module that's coming out in the second quarter of 2026. That's already in development. CMMC is a new one for us. That's a compliance regulatory requirement for government contractors. Some of you may be familiar with that. It aligns very well with some of the other things that we do in TRAC. Zach touched a little bit on e-commerce capabilities. This is important for those of you on this call. These new features that we roll out, new modules, this will make it really easy for you to experience a free trial, for example, of a new module. So you'll be able to get really easy access to those new modules that we're rolling out. So that'll be important. And that'll be another one that kind of continues throughout the year. AI capabilities, we actually are bulking up our team a bit with AI developers who have experience building out AI products. With the breadth and depth of data in TRAC, AI is such a useful tool to be able to present that to our customers so that they can use AI to get the data out of TRAC that they need, find information that they need, get insights that maybe aren't as easy to capture in TRAC. So AI is going to be something that we continue to invest in. That's an ever-changing technology. And so that'll be something that is continually on our roadmap, just like content reporting and support maintenance. So AI will be something that we start to roll out. We're actually excited to announce that we'll be moving into early adopter stage yet this month. So if you're interested in being an early adopter for some limited AI capabilities in TRAC, particularly in the vendor module is where we're starting, you'll have that opportunity on the survey for the event today. I did also want to touch on, I saw there was a question regarding the NIST AI risk management framework. And as we think about the roadmap, regulatory changes can always kind of make us adapt quickly and make changes to our roadmap. So that is one thing. I know there's NIST has announced they're reviewing and getting feedback on the risk management framework for AI. And so that is potentially also something that would shift a few of these things around, because that's obviously an important component to our NIST module. One other thing I wanted to, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to jump in real quick to say, I think one of the things that our team has been so good about, and I think the employee access module is a great example, is being able to be agile and nimble about moving things around. I think, if I'm not mistaken, employee access started, I think, 2 years ago, basically, and we kind of had to put it on the shelf to get NIST and CRI out, and then it kind of came back up and we were able to get it done. So I think your team does a fantastic job being nimble when it comes to those things.
Yeah, and that's critical when it comes to software and managing kind of the roadmap, is being able to identify those, changes in the market, regulatory changes, things like that, and being able to shift and adjust quickly. And that's one thing I'm proud of the team for, that in 2025, that was definitely a theme. We kind of have a plan until something changes the plan, and then we adjust and we try to make sure that we're always attacking the highest priority items. So that's great. And I appreciate you jumping in, because I was losing my breath a little bit. So.
I can tell you're just trying to avoid fading out. I like it. That's good.
I'm trying to get through it before you lose me again. So I do appreciate that. I was starting to fade out a little bit. But I wanted to mention real quick. So we are kicking off something we've talked to several of our customers about, is an AI peer group. We're a cybersecurity company, technology company. We know AI is another tool that our customers are going to use, and SBS has had a major focus on AI and enabling our customers to utilize AI in a way that makes their businesses better. We're going to be kicking off an AI peer group later this month, and so again, if you're interested in that, we'd love to hear from you. Just a way for us to facilitate conversations with our customers, allow them to kind of share ideas about how they're using AI within their organization. So that is, you'll see information on it. We're going to be sending out some invites, but wanted to give you a little sneak peek of that as well. And if you're interested, feel free to reach out and let us know, and we'll make sure you get the invitation.
So as we're wrapping up, I think you had a screenshot you wanted to talk about really quickly, just for vendor AI.
I did. Again, AI is something we're so excited about, because I think leveraging it as a tool within TRAC is really going to open up, so many opportunities for us to make TRAC a better product, for our customers to use TRAC in new ways that they haven't in the past. And so there's just so much groundwork that you have to build as you're building AI into an existing product. But I wanted to give a little sneak peek for those attendees today, because no one else has seen this. Like I said, we're going to be opening up for early adopters who'd like to be one of our first customers to get access and give us feedback and really share ideas on other ways that we can use AI in TRAC. But we've got it built out. Like I said, it's in vendor today. You can utilize it to review documents, find information very easily in documents, and then also just ask, general questions within the vendor management module. So that will be continuing to roll out. We're going to have a smaller group of customers that will have initial access. And then we'll go to a full market launch. So more to come on AI, but wanted to share a little sneak peek of what that looks like within TRAC.
Yeah, and I think if we were going to pick a module to start with, vendor was the one to do it. Obviously, there's so many questions that come up with that. How can I review this document? Where can I find answers? I think that's going to be a knockout feature for a lot of folks. So definitely, if you're interested in participating on that smaller group, please respond in the survey. So To that end, I really appreciate everybody's time today. Obviously, we had a lot of great people from our team on the call. We've got a lot of great customers and hopefully future customers of TRAC taking a look at the demo or the webinar here today. My contact information is on the screen here. I'm going to take a peek and see if we had any questions come in here, see if we can get those answered. If not, we'll definitely answer them after the fact. But I do want to thank you all. Want to remind you, if you don't mind taking that survey for us, we'd really appreciate it. That would be very, very helpful to us going forward. And again, to everybody that was on the panel today, everybody, Zach, Tony, John, Don, Lindsay, I don't think I missed anybody there. I really appreciate your time as well. So thank you all. And again, I'm going to take a look and see if we had any questions. And if you had one and want to stick around, we'll see if we can get those answered for you here. So
I think I got all of the answers.
Zach, good work. Look at you. Okay, I think we're actually good. You did everything. I misspelled your name. I tried to mess you up on the slide deck, and you still came through for me, a true friend. So again, I'll leave my contact information up here for everybody. If you need to reach out, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, hope you have a great rest of your day and a great 2026. So thank you again.